Hi, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. Property investment is full of ups and downs, and it's not always easy, but sometimes you can get really emotional over the wrong things in property. You can get too attached, you can get too distressed. But this week, we're going to help you understand what to look out for so you can get awareness around it and become a much better property investor.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday property investors come to be informed and inspired. It's always tempting with property to fixate on the numbers behind an investment, but even if the numbers are spot on, you can still end up making so many poor decisions because you're being led astray by your emotions. Today's episode is full of lots of practical tips to watch out for those dangers and steer clear of them. And stick around to the end for Hub Extra, where we've got a highly relevant book to recommend too. I detect the hand of Rob B in our news story this week because it's about Liverpool, but it is a really significant story that makes it in on merit. So Rob, what's going on up there?
Yeah, we've taken this news story from the Place Northwest website, and the headline isn't that exciting. It says, Upper Central Master Plan, close to sign-off. Not that exciting, right? Well, it is if you dig deeper. It's like one of these stories that's a bit back to front. Unsensational headline, but really big news in the detail. And the big news is information around a huge project in Liverpool called the Knowledge Quarter. It's a whole district that's pretty much being created. The land is there, but it's not well used at the moment. And this is a £2 billion scheme. And what's great about this, besides its ambition and the impact that it will have on the city, is that it seems to have full support from the local authority, from the mayor, and from developers. Everyone's getting behind this project. Liverpool Water's a multi-billion pound scheme, which we've talked about before on the podcast, is starting to make progress. But because it's just one developer really controlling things there, it is slow progress. It's started and it's on its way, but I think the Knowledge Quarter will really fast forward and accelerate. And I was in Liverpool last week meeting with some developers, and another area that's really exciting and one to watch is around the King's Dock area. That's where the M&S Arena is, and very close to the Arbor Dock. But unknown to most people, a lot of that dock area is undeveloped, even though it's prime central Liverpool. And again, the local authority is very keen to see that developed, and developers are tendering their bids right now for that scheme. So it's going to be really interesting to watch that as well. But the main thing to take from this is that the momentum is there. It's a great city in its own right. It's world famous. It's got loads going for it. But to see multiple billion-pound projects taking place now across the city, or at least started, is really good to see and bodes well for the city and its future. Yes, of course, I'm biased, but we'll remind everyone that we picked Manchester ahead of Liverpool years gone by, and we even put our office there. So I'm not completely biased, but I'm very pleased to see Liverpool doing well.
Over the last few weeks, we've been talking a bit about Property Hub Live, our biggest live event ever, which is happening on the 30th of April at Tottenham Hotspur's Stadium in London. It's going to be an awesome day, full of education, us recording the podcast live, our biggest meetup ever. If that sounds awesome to you and this is the first you're hearing about it, unfortunately, it's sold out. It's sold out super quickly. Everyone's really excited about it, and rightly so, Rob, because it's going to be an awesome day.
It is going to be an awesome day. Sold out really quick, and it's going to be a bit bonkers to think just over 400 hubbers coming together in one space at the same time to celebrate all things property investment. It's going to be a marvellous day. Really, really looking forward to it. The lineup is great. The venue is great. It's all set for a wonderful day. Of course, if you've missed out, pop your name down on the waiting list. We'll let you know if any tickets become available, although admittedly unlikely, but we'll also let you know when we launch our event in Manchester later this year. It's a few months away now, but if you're super keen and you've missed out this time, you can pop your name down on our website.
One of the things that makes property such a popular investment is that it's really real, it's really tangible. Everyone can relate to property and it's not abstract in the way that an investment in the stock market or bonds would be. And that is a brilliant thing. But it comes with a risk as well. It's easy for your emotions to get involved in property more than they should do. And you'll end up making poor decisions that you wouldn't make if you were approaching it purely as an investment. This risk of being driven by your emotions shows up at every point in the process. When you're buying a property, when you're setting it up while you own it, and then again, when you come to sell. So we're going to run through each one of those and make you aware of some of the risks and give you the opportunity to catch yourself if you're about to fall into one of these traps.
So let's start with buying. So buying a property is a big deal. You know, you're buying an asset worth tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's not like you're going for your local grocery shop. So, of course, emotion can come into this, but it's got to come into it in the right way. And one of the things that we see over and over again is people buying in the wrong areas because they're being emotional about their decision. So they're not buying in the right investment area, they're buying in an area that they want to live in themselves. Now, this may play out because they just want to invest locally and that feels safe and secure, and there are some advantages to that. But the area close to you could be a terrible place to invest, and just because you love it doesn't mean necessarily tenants will love it or it will do well for capital growth purposes. The best may have passed. It might be the right time to, but the chances of your local area being the best place to invest right now are slim to none. Now, that doesn't mean you have to invest on either side of the country, but let's say within an hour radius from you. There may be areas that you personally wouldn't want to live in, but are great for investment. Don't rule those areas out. Be pragmatic. Look at the fundamentals, look at the prospects of the area, look at the rental demand, do all the research, and even if it's an area that you don't particularly like, if you find out that it ticks all the investment boxes, consider it.
So that's the area, and the same thing goes for the property as well. It's very easy to fall in love with a property, especially if you go and see a property and it's been really nicely staged. The owner's been clever about it and really made it look beautiful. You can start mentally moving in. And that can be a problem because it's very easy to emotionally decide that this is the right property. Then when you're putting together the numbers afterwards, just be a little more generous at each point than you otherwise would be to create an investment case to back up the decision that you emotionally wanted to make anyway. That's a really difficult trap to avoid, but it's an important one. That doesn't mean, of course, that you should ever rent out a property that you don't think is a great place for somebody to live. But again, like with the area, there are properties where you personally wouldn't want to live, but for the target demographic, it's ideal. And on the numbers, as an investment, it's ideal. So it's a real balancing act, but falling in love with a property first is a dangerous thing to do.
Something else you need to be aware of and make sure you don't do is that if you find the right property in the right area at what you believe initially is the right price, but can't get a deal done, you don't keep upping your numbers and getting carried away because you could end up overpaying for a property. And that's something we call internally in Property Hub deal bias. When we're looking at deals, we may spend days, weeks putting a deal together and we just can't get it done. And the temptation is just to increase the numbers that little bit more because of all that time invested. But we know it's the wrong thing to do. And it's the wrong thing for you to do as well. If you've put a lot of time and effort to getting a deal over the line and then something goes wrong, suddenly there's a big bill that you've not accounted for at the beginning, or the vendor wants more money, whatever the reason, doesn't matter that you've put a lot of time and emotion into buying that property. If it becomes a bad deal at any point, or even a below average deal, you need to have the strength to walk away. But before you have the strength to walk away, you need the awareness to say, I'm doing that, I better stop. And that's hard to do. And we see this happen a lot. So just be careful.
It is really hard because even if you're not emotionally committed to the property, you can be emotionally committed to the deal at that point, and talking yourself out of that is hard. You could also be emotionally committed to just the idea of buying something and end up rushing into a purchase just for the sake of buying something. And this is surprisingly common. It's something that we see all the time. You see it with people who've come into money recently, maybe as an inheritance. You see it with people who've remortgaged their home to start investing. And you even see it among people who've just been turned on to property investment and they've gone, yes, this is what I need to be doing. Property investment is for me, so I'm going to go and buy something right now. Rushing in and buying the first thing you see just because you emotionally want to buy something is very unlikely to be a good idea. It's possible that that first property you see on your first weekend of looking is exactly the right one for you, but it's more likely that it's not. So the way to get around that is to identify your buying criteria and stick to them. Know in advance what it is that you're looking for and then judge everything against those criteria. It's probably almost impossible to completely emotionally disconnect, but you definitely want the balance to be tipped towards the logical and the numbers driven as much as you possibly can.
Another place you need to be aware that you're not being too emotional is if you're buying off plan and you're looking at the plans and trying to pick which unit you're going to go for. Now, for example, if it's apartments, some people get really fixated on the aspect. Is it south, north, east, west? Is it high floor, low floor? Remember, what you really want, some other tenants will really want as well. But also, there are some people who really won't want your choices. So, for example, if you want a high floor, the family with young children may want a low floor, or the person who doesn't like heights may want a low floor, or the person who doesn't want to go up through the lift every day will want a lower floor, or the elderly person may want the lower floor. Remember, just because you like something doesn't mean everyone will like it. Therefore, the importance you're putting on getting that plot over another is probably unjustified. It also quite amuses me when people will buy off plan in, say, a place like Manchester, which isn't known for its wonderful weather, and get really fixated on whether it's north, south, east or west. The clouds look the same whatever direction you look at, so it doesn't really make too much difference. You aren't picking up much Mediterranean sun in Manchester, so again, probably not that important. But some people seem to get really emotional over that.
So what we've talked about so far is selecting a property to buy, and hopefully you can keep emotion out of that process. The next area where you need to keep your emotions in check, and it's not easy to do, is during the buying process. There are many wonderful things about property. The actual process of buying one is not one of those. It's awful. The process of going through the legals can take months and seem like it takes far longer than it should, involve too much chasing from you, get dragged out far more than necessary. And then the finance part of it, arranging your mortgage, can be challenging as well and have lots of setbacks there. It's possible that during that process you'll have mortgage offers fall through. You'll have the property valued at less than you wanted it to be.
Yeah, so even if nothing goes wrong, it's still a rubbish process. The legal process is slow. Your solicitor might be great, and hopefully you've picked a good one, but if the seller solicitor is less than great, then guess what your experience will be? Less than great. And no matter how upset you get or frustrated, it probably isn't going to change much because your solicitor only has so much power over the seller solicitor. It's the same with finance. There's loads of forms, it takes forever. No matter how many times you've done it, you'll still find it a frustrating process. Accept it. It's going to be the way. You might not get the mortgage product you want. The lender that you've picked may be oversubscribed, so therefore their service levels are atrocious and it takes longer again than you'd anticipated. If it doesn't happen this time, it'll happen next time. It's not a great process, unfortunately. Purchasing any property is slow and, if you allow it to be, frustrating. But the thing is, if you know in advance that this is how it's going to be, you can choose to accept it, push it on as much as you can, but beyond that, don't let it push you. Don't let it make you mad with your solicitor or your broker or yourself or your family, whoever. Just accept that this is how it is. And if you're going to be a property investor, you're going to have to live with it.
So you've bought the property and maybe it's completely ready to go and ready for a tenant to move in. But if there's any kind of refurb involved, that's another area where there's the potential for emotions to get the better of you and end up making some poor decisions. The classic mistake that you see is overspending on a refurb because you're imagining yourself living there.
Kitchens and bathrooms in particular are very easy to get carried away with because they're beautiful. You know, they make a real difference. And yes, you should pick the right kitchen and bathroom, but not necessarily the most expensive kitchen and bathroom. Know the property. And what I mean by that is, are you picking the correct kitchen for the type of property? So if you are buying a 2-up-2 down in Burnley, the 20 grand kitchen is probably going a little over the top. It may look beautiful and it may make you happy buying that kitchen, but it's not going to add enough value to make it work. Now, of course, you want a good quality kitchen and a good quality bathroom for your tenants, and you want to provide a lovely home for them. Absolutely. But just be careful. Don't go over the top. Remember that extra 2-3 grand you can spend on a kitchen and bathroom, how much extra rent is it going to get you each month? An extra £25? Well, then if you break it down on how many months it's going to take you to break even on that kitchen and bathroom that you spent the extra £2,000-3,000 on, it's a lot of months. It's a lot of years. So just be careful, have that awareness, and don't get excited in the showrooms.
The same goes for furnishing the property if you choose to furnish the property or if the market requires it. Now, again, this is a balancing act. You see people go the wrong way with this because they're looking at it too much as an investment. So like, okay, I need to furnish the property. I'm going to furnish it as cheaply as I possibly can because they're only watching the numbers. And that means for the sake of a relatively small amount of money in the scheme of things, you've ended up with a property that's unappealing to potential tenants because it just looks cheap. But you also see the other extreme. So you see a property that really just requires a pretty basic furniture pack, but the owner goes completely overboard and puts in super fancy furniture that is first of all going to cost more and so affect your setup costs. But then inevitably each part of that will wear out at a different time and need replacing. So you're going to have higher costs every time you come to replace some of the furniture as well. As with refurbing, you shouldn't be trying to cut corners, but you also shouldn't be led by your own preferences. Be led by the market. Take advice from your letting agent or from other local professionals to put in what's appropriate, even if it's not what you would personally have in your own home.
Okay, so we've covered buying and we've covered refurbing. The next up is owning. Yep, it carries on. Things will go wrong when you own. That's to be expected. It's like a business. Things go wrong in businesses all the time. And the bigger your business gets or the bigger your portfolio gets, the more problems you have. It's just a fact. You become a firefighter, not a landlord. You're putting out the fires. And if you've got a small portfolio, you may not feel that. And if you don't build a medium or large portfolio, this might not happen to you that often, or it may not have happened to you yet, but it will happen. At some point, you're going to have a bad tenant. You may have perfect tenants for a long time, but at some point, you're just going to have a bad one. Just like tenants, at some point, if they keep moving, will find a bad landlord. It's just going to happen. You have to accept it. If you're a property investor, it's just par for the course. It's going to happen. Another thing you have to accept is things are going to break or get destroyed. Rob and I have talked about our own experiences of owning properties in the past, and these things happen. We've had bad tenants, we've had things break, we've had things get destroyed. You just have to accept that that's going to play out. But fortunately, there are things you can do in advance to make it a less painful experience if that does play out.
Yeah, the most important thing to do is to make sure you're not too financially stretched. Because if you hit an unexpected cost, of course you don't want to be spending the money. No one's happy about it, but it's so much easier to get emotional over it if it's putting you in a really difficult financial position. So having some kind of contingency, so it's like, well, yeah, I'm not happy about spending the money, but at least I know where it's coming from and it's not going to affect anything else. That really helps. Same goes for insurance. So you'll need to have suitable buildings insurance that you can call on for more extreme cases where you need to. You could also insure the rent if you want to. So if you have a tenant who stops paying, the insurance will kick in and you'll keep on getting paid. So that way you'll end up financially in a better place. The other thing is to make sure that you've got a team around you, the people you work with, who can sort this out for you without it taking loads of your own time. You're going to feel more emotional about something if something happens and you end up having to spend vast amounts of your time sorting it out, time that's taking you away from things that you'd rather be doing or putting you through all kinds of aggro. There's always going to be some kind of emotion involved, especially if it's a property that you've been highly involved in setting up. Maybe you've done some of the work on it yourself, or you've personally put the specification together. If that happens and it gets destroyed somehow, then you're not going to feel happy about it. But if you're able to distance yourself from the process of putting it right, so it doesn't take up loads of your time and it doesn't put you in an uncomfortable financial situation, it's going to be easier to just shrug it off.
So Rob and I have shared our own stories on the podcast before, but luckily, or not so lucky for him, but our producer Dan has given us a story that highlights just how quickly things can turn. So Dan had a cheap and cheerful house just outside of Nottingham city centre, great location, great hotspot Nottingham. Great tenants, excellent tenants. Been in there for 3 years, paid on time, all the time. And then one day, the rent stopped coming in. The agent went round to discover that they just dropped the keys through the mailbox to check out, like it was a hotel. Then, if that wasn't enough, the empty house was broken into, and all the fixtures, wiring, pipes, all stolen, which meant the house was unlettable. So a disaster, right? Well, sort of. But Dan called the insurance company, and his agent helped arrange the repairs. The insurance paid for the refurb, the loss of the rental income, and fortunately he also had other properties in the portfolio to help make up for that shortfall while that was happening. Now, all of this was done with a few phone calls from London. So it sounds like an absolute nightmare. And it can be a nightmare in your own head if you want it to be. But by setting your portfolio up in the right way, it can be certainly much less of a nightmare. And actually, if you think about Dan's involvement, it was minimal. A few phone calls and having a great team around him allowed him to navigate that quite tricky situation with relative ease. So, yes, these things will happen, but it's how you set yourself up before and how you handle it afterwards that will make a difference.
And then, maybe one day down the line, there's selling the property. And that's another area where your emotions can lead you astray. First of all, your emotions could stop you from selling the property when the time is right to do so. Now, selling's not going to be part of everyone's strategy. You might buy properties with the aim of holding onto them forever and passing them on. But as we've talked about before, there are times in the property cycle that lend themselves very nicely to disposing of properties that aren't performing as they should. So not every purchase you make will be great. There might be some where you bought with a certain capital growth expectation because of something you thought was going to happen in the area, and it's just not happened and doesn't look likely to happen. There might be one where you unexpectedly struggle to find tenants and it sits empty for far too long between tenancies. If that's happened, there will be times when the market will help you out and make it a lot easier to shift those properties than it otherwise would be. When that happens, you want to be able to take advantage of that and not hold on just because you're emotionally attached to the property. So this is an area where you definitely want to strip out the emotion. Just look at the numbers of what that property's done for you over the last few years. If it's not performing and if it's a good time to get rid, then do it. Don't allow yourself to mentally talk yourself out of it and come up with justifications for why you should keep it just because you're emotionally attached.
So if you've not invested in property before, you could be listening to this and going, woof, sounds like hard work. And it can be hard work if you make it or you let it be. But remember, like we said, investing is a business. Things will go wrong. And you've just got to do your best to keep your costs down, be efficient, and at the end, obviously, maximise your profits. So keep the fancy pants decorating and that super luxury dream kitchen for your own place. Make sure when you invest, you're going for the right investment, not the one that makes you feel warm and fuzzy. It's about getting the best deal in the best area. So make sure you understand what you're getting into. And as we've heard, if you prepare for the worst, and the worst does happen, it makes it a lot less worse. So put those steps in place so when things do go wrong, as we said, they will, it's a lot easier to navigate. And it's important, so important to remember from all of this. And this could be a lesson for life. You know, there are things that are going to go wrong and things that are going to be out of your control. And you can get wound up and frustrated. And often that's understandable. But ultimately, property's just a business. Why let it bother you so much? It's your choice. Remember, pretty much everything in property can be fixed. Much of it also can be prevented. So work on prevention first, and then when something goes wrong, it's a lot less scary. Even if you haven't prevented for it in the right way, you can still find a solution. But getting upset or angry with yourself or other people isn't going to help you get there. Try and keep yourself in check. You're not a robot, and that's okay. And some things are going to be so bad that you will get emotional. But if you have the awareness that we talked about of all these situations, you'll better navigate them. So good luck.
So you're never going to be able to keep your emotions completely out of property, but if you do a reasonable job of keeping yourself on the right track, then you'll have a success story to share, and we love to hear them. So if you've just landed a great deal, you've finished a refurb and you're feeling really pleased with yourself, or you've just taken a first step, then we really want to know. You can let us know on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at Property Hub UK, or over on the Property Hub forum. This week we're going to share a success story from Toby, who sent us a message on Facebook to say, I'm an avid listener to the podcast and look forward to the new one each week. I started investing in student accommodation when I left a role with a corporate estate agency to start my own boutique agency. I started in 2017 and have just completed on my third HMO, each generating around 11% gross yield. Your advice on good and bad debt gave me the motivation and the confidence to carry on and continue. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, Toby. Really good to hear. Never easy to strike out on your own, but it sounds like you identified an opportunity, you had the confidence to go for it, and you've made a huge success of it. So well done.
So we've got the perfect Hub Extra for you this week. It's a book, and it's a book about emotions. And I know we've talked a lot about how you need to keep them in check. Life is emotional, and we're not robots, as we said, and that's okay. The book we've recommended is about emotion, but it's aimed mainly at children. But I do think that it could benefit anybody and everyone. But I think particularly boys will benefit from this book. And this is a book that we got for our son. Because how often do you hear the phrase like, man up? Or don't act like a girl? Or insert another phrase. You know, these are things that we hear all the time. And we pass these messages on without really thinking about how they may impact our children or each other. And men are known to grow up, not all men, but some men are known to grow up to shut down their emotions and be a bit cold when it comes to these things. And it could be because of some of the messages we're taught and told as we're growing up. There's probably more to it than that. And it's a far more complex subject than I can even begin to understand. But to help my son navigate this crazy world that we live in, we got him the book called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. And it's by Charlie Mackesy. Now, this is a beautiful book, and I'm really going to struggle to do it justice. So I'm going to read from the back cover to give you an understanding of what it's about. Enter the world of Charlie's four unlikely friends. Discover their story and their most important life lessons. The conversations of the boy, the mole, the fox and the horse have been shared thousands of times online. Recreated in school art classes, hung on hospital walls and turned into tattoos. In Charlie's first book, you'll find the most loved illustrations and some new ones too. A wonderful work of art and a wonderful window into the human heart. And it is. I'd recommend you to just Google this book or look for it on YouTube to get an understanding, because I don't think I'm going to do it justice. But I'm going to quickly read you a review of the book from Amazon. Not my review, don't know who this person is, but it says, "This is a beautiful book. It was bought for me as an anniversary gift and I've read it today. It's such a gentle book with kind words that moved me so much. It's not a clever book filled with trendy babble, but filled with kindness, love and friendship. I felt quite fragile lately, and this book filled me with hope." And I think this book will fill you with hope. Whether you're feeling fragile or not, this is a great book. And whether you've got children or not, or a young son or not, I think this is a great book to look at and consider. It's a great gift as well. So check it out. It's a bit of an unusual resource for us, but I'm so impressed with it and moved by it by myself that I thought it has to make Hub Extra this week. So that's us done for another week. Remember, you can keep in touch with us via the social channels by searching for @PropertyHubUK, whether that's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course you've got the amazing propertyhub.net forum to take advantage of too. We'll be back next Tuesday with Ask Rob and Rob, and of course back at the same time next week with the Property Podcast. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.